Okay, everybody. So I know that there's a few more people finding their seats right now, but I think we're just about to get started with the surprisingly deep lore of Bionicle. And thank you. And as the title card says, it's pretty rad if you don't know that already, okay? If that doesn't scream radical and tubular to you, I don't know what will. But so basically this is a early 2000s Bionicle toy line. I'm sure if you're in this room, you at least have some kind of passing familiarity with Bionicle. I'm not, unfortunately, going to have too much time to go over all of, like, the meme culture and like some of the other cultural stuff that surrounds Bionicle. Unfortunately, that does include I won't be able to play all of the music videos. That part does kind of bum me out. We only have an hour, and yeah, long story short, Bionicle lore is incredibly dense, and it was kind of the first LEGO line to actually do so. And basically, as I was doing my research here, there's 4 movies. Those I knew about, and I knew there's a handful of books about Bionicle set in the universe. There is over 30. Found that out. So, and that is for a LEGO theme that ran for 10 years. And a smattering of games as well. So. And the reboot, yeah. We're not talking about Gen 2, unfortunately, but, What? Yeah, so the comics will be popping up in here. So we'll be talking about all the comics. So basically, we'll be going over the main story from when the line first started and then to where Gen 1 ended. So, just about me, super duper quick plug. Sorry, gotta do it. I'm a huge nerd. These are pictures of me with my Bionicle collection when I was a wee lad. So, yeah, I've pretty much been a Bionicle fan since, like, elementary school. It goes pretty deep. And then if you guys also like reading about comics and other nerd stuff and checking out YouTube videos, I have a YouTube channel called the BS Crew, if you guys want to search that up. Talk about a lot of different comic books and stuff like that, as well as I have a podcast with some friends. So, on to Bionicle. First, we're going to start with the creator. We have Greg Farshti here. He also wrote all the comics, most of the books, and kind of consulted on the games and everything. Basically, he came to LEGO with this gigantic 10-year roadmap about the first launch of Bionicle, and he seems like a really cool dude. Creator of the Bionicle universe, Bionicle as well as LEGO Star Wars kind of pulled LEGO out of bankruptcy in the late 90s and early 2000s. And Greg Farshti, being kind of the figurehead for the Bionicle universe, he was one of the guys basically responsible for kind of pulling LEGO out. He also helped create Exoforce, if you like that as well. That was a really cool like mech suit line. Love some Exoforce. Also had some sick comics. And then there's Ninjago, which I'm not as familiar with. But yeah, Ninjago is also cool. We love Ninjago. And then Hero Factory, which was the original replacement for Bionicle as well. So until last year, actually, he was the editorial director of LEGO for like 20 years. And fun fact, he's a Hartford native. So yeah, great. All right, so this will be the basics. So I'm gonna be starting from like ground zero here. So if you already know all this, I'm sorry, but we're going over like if you've never looked at a Bionicle before, this is what we're doing. Okay. So, the Toa, which is a word you're going to be hearing a lot, they're essentially the heroes of this story, okay? They are, obviously Bionicles are like these like pseudo-robotic organic creatures, and the Toa are basically the superpowered ones that do like a lot of the action fighting, all the biggest sets and all that stuff. Then there's the Turaga, the guys on the second, kind of like the middle panel there. Those are the smaller, they're basically like village elders for a lot of this. So they're kind of like sages that will like guide the people. And then there's the Matoran, and then the red and yellow dude, that's Jala, we'll talk about him later. And he, basically the Matoran are just kind of the average folk, right? And then there's also Rahi, they're basically Bionicle animals. There's Makuta, the big bad, basically the devil in this case, and Mata Nui, who is the great spirit, and he's basically the Matoran's god for the majority of the series. And then unity, duty, and destiny, it's the 3 virtues, all the Matoran live by it, they do that, in the service of Mata Nui, it's great stuff. So, getting started with the story, the Toa Mata arrive on Mata Nui. So, Mata Nui is basically, translates to great spirit in the Matoran language. So they live on this island called Mata Nui, and then one day, 6 heroes arrive in canisters on Mata Nui. They all represent different elements. So there's fire, air, water, ice, stone, and earth. One thing to note is that there's actually villages on this island of Mata Nui that all kind of correlate to those 6 elements as well. There's other elements. There's like 10 more if you like dive deep into the books and stuff. not talking about those. The main 6 plus one other one that we're going to be talking about later are kind of the main ones that you need to know about. They are guided by the elders, the Turaga, and basically the Turaga kind of like more or less try to like rally the Toa when they first get to the island to be like, you're our protectors, because they show up with no memory of who they are or like how they got there. They basically know their names and that's about it. And yeah, the Toa are protectors of the Matoran and the Great Spirit Mata Nui. So kind of the first arc that happens with the Toa Mata here, they search for the masks. So if you see all the Toa here wearing, all the characters wearing masks, but specifically the Toa, all of their masks have a special power. So if anybody is not a small dude, their mask basically has a special power going forward, okay? So a lot of them grant like flight, levitation, some people can do mind reading, reanimation is one that's going to come up later as well. Pretty much everybody has these different masks. And the Toa Mata, kind of their first quest was to actually find, basically they were trying to like cover each other. So they found these masks hidden on the island that all correlate with one another's power. So like if someone's power was levitation, another person's was telekinesis, they would basically find like each other's like correlating masks. So eventually by the time this first arc ends, they all have each other's powers. They all have the 6 main core abilities that they're using. And then while they're doing this, they're mostly fighting Rahi and some other dark creatures that Makuta has been sending after them. But that is when the Borak come in. So if you look on the bottom left there, kind of like the red and like bluish clear colored ones, those are the Borak. They basically have these things called Krana. And the really cool thing about the sets, these Krana are like masks that get put onto Toa and the Matoran, and they basically mind control them. It's basically like a big hive mind that live on the island. And obviously, they're bad, so the Toa are like, hey, they're hurting our friends, we gotta stop them. So they chase after them. But there's gigantic swarms, so they're always outnumbered until they find the Borak Queen. So kind of those middle ones on the bottom there, they are essentially kind of like the ringleaders for the hive mind here. And again, I'm sorry, I know we're kind of going at like a blitzkrieg pace right now. There's a ton to cover. And then so when they find the Borak Queens, they fight, and basically how they defeat them, again, this was like a children's line, so they defeat them by coming together as a team and all shooting them with their magic blasts at the same time, okay? And that brings them down. But before that happens, there is the Borak Call. So if you see the similar Borak in the bottom right there, basically these are like ball-like creatures, just exactly like the Borak. Lego wanted to basically make more of these because the original Borak sold like gangbusters, and they were like bestsellers of that year. And they were like, hey, how can we do this again? And they just kind of cheaped out, and they were like, oh, we're just going to do like a palette swap, and, we're going to just resell them. So yeah, the Borakal are basically more powerful. There is, as far as I recall, there's only the, 6 of them that each correlate to their own element as well. So they also have special abilities and not just like brute strength to go against the Toa. So it's kind of the first time that they really are able to really meet something that kind of like, kind of meets them like on a one-to-one basis. And yeah, after they defeat the Borakal here, there is what is called the Protodermis transformation. Protodermis is this element basically in Bionicle lore. It's usually seen in kind of like a liquid form. It basically mutates people, right? In a lot of cases, it makes them stronger. In some other places we're going to be talking about later on, it mutates them, kind of makes them, kind of like side grades them, but it kind of mutates them, makes them look kind of freaky. So they do basically all the Toa, they drop into this cavern essentially, and they get flooded with Protodermis, and then they basically get a power upgrade, and they become the Toa Nuva. So these sets were pretty much like the most popular ones when I was growing up, at least. I don't know about you guys. I saw these all the time. Everybody had at least a couple. In that, if you guys are familiar with the movies at all, or if you've watched them even in the slightest bit, there was The Mask of Light. So if you watch the movie, yes.
Didn't that happen after they transformed into the Toa Nuva after they defeated the Borak Queens?
So it was the Borak Call, and then it was the Toa Nuva. So then they got upgraded after. Okay.
They defeated the Barra Queens and then
And then that was the Protodermis. My bad. My bad.
Yeah, because the Barra obscure their noble symbols, and that's how they beat them.
Okay, apologies. Okay, my bad. My bad. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm a faker. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so the Toa Nuva in the Mask of Light. If you guys have seen the first movie, this is basically just kind of recapping what happens there. Oh, yes.
Yeah, just like we have a lot of NPCs on.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Make some friends, folks. Definitely. There's plenty of open seats over here. So we got that. Yeah. Raise your hand if you got an open seat next to you, and then that way you guys can kind of filter your way in, slide on down a bit. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Appreciate you.
Got 4 over here.
All right, so we got 4 open seats. We got 3 right here. Got a handful more over here. Let's see. Okay, cool. So, basically, the Toa Mata become the Toa Nuva. Upgrades, basically, they're just stronger, more powerful. They're basically the toughest people on the island, for now. The Mask of Light is found. So, if you watch the movie, you know this. There's 2 Matoran, Jaller and Takua. These are 2 names. They're very important. They're going to come up very frequently, okay? They're both Ta Matoran, which they're basically Matoran that live in the Village of Fire, right? There's an asterisk there for anybody else that might try to correct me, I promise. And then, so basically, one day they find the Mask of Light, and this basically makes them go on a search for the 7th Toa. All right. And then while this happens, Makuta, really not wanting the prophesized Toa of Light to come to form, Makuta unleashes the Rakshi. And the Rakshi are these things here. Obviously, they look bad, but they're like snake-like robotic creatures, and they are controlled by also like little snake-like little things, and it's basically like a robotic shell. So if you see in the bottom of the picture there's like the little slithering ones. They don't do mind control or anything, but the Rakshi are far more deadly than the Borok were. Tons of like different like poisonous and just pretty much can go toe-to-toe with the Toa Nuva. It's kind of a dumb search for the Toa Nui. I'm gonna be for the Toa of Light. If you guys have seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about here. Yeah, it's been years. It's not really a spoiler. We're gonna talk about it in a second. The Toa Nuva are basically, long story short, as they keep battling back and forth. Tahu gets infected. Tahu is the red, kind of the leader. He gets infected, and he's just like really sick, kind of down and out. And during one of these fights, Jaller, who is not pictured here, but he's kind of the red and the yellow one from earlier, he actually jumps in front of a Rakshi blast, and he dies. So that is the first death of the series. It's but don't worry. Okay, we're gonna put a pin in that. Okay, we'll be back. And so while all that's happening, Jaller, not Jaller, Takua, the red and blue one at the top there, he realizes that, oh hey, this light that has been pointing out of the mask the entire time, it's actually been pointing towards me. I'm him. I'm the 7th Toa. I'm gonna be the Toa. So Takua puts on the mask of light there, and he turns into Taka Nuva. All right, so he becomes one of the Toa Nuva. Pretty handily defeats the Rakshi, and he turns them into his motorcycle, which is pretty cool. So if you look at the set on the top there, that's just a bunch of dead Rakshi robotic parts. It's pretty sick. He charges into Makuta's den, and then Makuta challenges him to a Koli match. Again, we're going real quick here. A Koli match is basically a sport that the Matoran play. It's like lacrosse-ish, kinda. And so instead of having a normal fight, they have a big Koli match. It's very epic. It's awesome if you've seen the movie, I promise. And then during kind of like the final conflict of that, they both fall into a pit of Protodermis. And as we've already established, Protodermis does some weird stuff, let alone when 2 people fall in, basically like bear hugging each other in a fight, right? Takuta Nuva is what emerges from the pit. So that is a being that is half Taka Nuva and half Makuta. Okay? Yeah, it looks very weird. Like, I'm not a fan of it, but it's fine. It's fine. And then basically they have like this like moment of clarity, and they open a very large door in this den, and it seemingly goes nowhere, right? And we'll dial back on that in a moment here. But so where does it lead? We don't know yet. And then the power of friendship brings Jaller back. And when I say that, it's because Takuta Nuva, again, in like a moment of clarity before Taka Nuva actually comes back, before they split up and everything, he basically has Jaller's mask, and he just kind of brings him back. It's largely debated of like what happened to make, what caused that. There's really no like definitive answer, but basically holding Jollar's mask, he brings him back to life. So yay, he's back, and Jollar will be very important later on in the story. Not the first Toa. This is the big first plot twist here. Your drawings are fake as fuck. Yeah. I thought this was fun. Thank you. Yeah. So in the actual panel here, Turaga Vakama, who is basically like the fire sage, right? He reveals that actually him and the 5 other Turaga that have been guiding hands along this whole process in their first adventure, they were Toa before the Toa Nuva were, right? And then we actually start going into this prequel in the next line of toys here, which are the Toa Metru. Basically, this is just a big flashback. It took up about, I think it was 2 full years on the toy line here, and we'll get into why in a moment. But yeah, so there's a flashback. The Turaga were once Toa in Metru Nui. And it's basically a police state when the story starts here. It's very shadowy. The guy on the bottom with like the hawk thing, that's Turaga Doom, also another sage leader, but he's acting very, very cagey. And then the Vaki, which are these disc shooter things here, they basically make sure that the Matoran keep in line, and things are kind of going bump in the night. You know, no one really knows what's going on yet, but then the Toa Metru kind of discover that, and I'll go over their origin in just a moment here. But as they kind of form up, they discover that Makuta is controlling Turaga Doom. So, you know, he's a shadow leader. There's not just one bad guy. Actually, it is just one bad guy. It's one bad guy for the first few years. And then while this conflict kind of escalates, eventually there is this thing called the Great Cataclysm that happens. This will come back much later, okay? But long story short, when Makuta is trying to kill everything, stuff goes bad. Metru Nui has gigantic earthquakes, you know, buildings are falling, all that stuff. And then eventually when everything calms down, the plot to this is, figured out, they fight off Makuta, Doom dies. Now, after they do this, they try to find a safe haven, right? Because they're like, hey, we're in like this like ruined city, everything kind of sucks, and we have a ton of Matoran that were captured by the Vaki, what do we do? And they go off to find a safe haven. And this is where we get to the 3rd movie, which is Web of Shadows. Okay, this one was pretty cool. We'll go. This was memed out a lot. Okay, so spider things called the Visorak have taken over. But basically what happens, the Toa Metru let's just go back a little bit. So the Toa Metru, after they fight off Makuta and they go searching for like a safe haven, they find the island of Mata Nui, right? And basically, so that was like a scouting mission. And then when they come back to successfully bring the rest of the Matoran to Mata Nui, that is when they lose. They're ambushed by the Visorak, which are these like spider creatures, and using the venom from the spider thingies, they turn it into Hordika. So basically, these guys on the top get mutated into those things on the top, and they basically turn beast-like. They're like part animal now. Vakama gets real edgy. He just kind of hates everybody. He's kind of a jerk for like 90 minutes. If you've seen the movie, you know. The books and everything too. And basically, he gets persuaded to more or less like join the dark side, where he teams up with Rudaka right here. Ooga. Yes. I showed so much restraint with what I could have put, like what art I could have put of Rudaka in here. Yeah, it's if you know, Rule 34, it's a thing. So while Vakama goes and he's being an edgelord elsewhere, the rest of the Toa Hordika now are guided by the Rahaga. So basically, they are once again like sages, but they were turned by Rudaka into being like half beast creatures. So they're very like kooky, and like they actually have like the heads of the Rakshi, at least like in the sets. So they're very beast-like, right? So they're very ugly. No one really wants to look at them, and they've been hiding. But when they see that the Toa are having issues, they go and try to kind of give them that guiding hand, like we see the Turaga try to do throughout the entire series. So they search for a cure, but only after discovering friendship again. So a very common theme that you will see here. A lot of the Toa fight all the time. They kind of don't like each other until there's this big anticlimactic thing. And then they're like, oh, we're cool now, great. And then, you just kind of hit the reset every year. And then they're like, oh, they hate each other again. Now they're friends again. So basically they all bond together. and basically they fight the. Okay, sorry. I think I got this a little bit out of order here. Okay. So basically, they start fighting off Dami Mami. That's Radaka, if you couldn't tell. Okay, she's a big fan. And her simp, who I don't have a picture of. His name is Sidorak. He sucks. The set's cool. Yeah, but also, he's like a pawn, more or less, you know? Yeah, and essentially, they were trying to bring Makuta back, but they fail, okay? And this is a time where I should bring up basically anybody that's a bad guy, and there might be a couple discrepancies here. If you see anybody that's a bad guy and their name is not Makuta, they're basically a Dark Hunter. Okay, and Dark Hunters are basically, again, evil Bionicles, more or less, right? There are a lot of bounty hunters, criminals, that kind of thing. And yeah, so they were trying to bring Makuta back, but they fail because, friendship is magic. We love the Toa. And the Toa Metru, they're purified by Kitangu. So there's this really cool orangey yellow. He's technically a Rahi, because he doesn't really have any like real speaking except kind of like single syllables, like not much. And when that happens, they bring the Matoran to Mata Nui like they were planning to all along. So you got it's basically filler. It's just kind of explaining how we got here. One thing to note, and this is how they become Turaga, in order to successfully wake all of the Matoran in these pods where they were captured initially, they basically need to sacrifice their Toa power, and that is when they basically turn back into Turaga. So they're, all sage-like, they walk with canes and stuff, Okay, meanwhile, after this explanation, the Mata Nui crew, so we're going back to the original Toa now, kind of present day, if you will. The Mata Nui crew, they move everybody back to Metru Nui because they're like, oh, the island sucks now. We're going to Metru Nui. So if you remember that tunnel that Takuta Nuva lifted open, that was the tunnel to go down into Metru Nui. So it's a giant tunnel that leads to this, like, giant Matoran city. And they're greeted by the real Turaga Doom. So once he gets kind of disinfected of all the Makuta stuff, he's a good guy again. He's another Turaga. The Rahaga and Kitangu. So they're all buds. They're pretty much just kind of like holding down the fort that entire time. And then after experiencing peace, the Turaga find scripts basically saying how to wake the Great Spirit. This is where the story gets good, I promise. The first part is to basically find the Mask of Life. The Toa Nuva, minus Takanuva, embark on a journey to what is called Voya Nui. Real quick, this is just where I want to sidestep. If you're wondering, like, how you can get, like, the full picture here, it's kind of like multi-medium storytelling. So, like, you could read some of the comics, you could read, if you want to get the full picture, you'll need to read and watch just about everything, right? So, like, if you're just watching, like, the 4 movies, you're going to have no idea what happens between Web of Shadows and Legend Reborn, right? Completely different. You will have zero idea what is happening. That is true. No, I do agree. And that is why that whole saga is like a footnote in this presentation at the end. What? Sorry, what was that?
I think there's a Crossfire Beats, I think.
Sorry, okay.
There's someone online who compiles all the comics and books into PDFs in order.
That is awesome.
So like, obviously the comics have interject between books. They'll actually switch between the book and then the comic page.
Yeah.
And some of them, but not all of them, have transcripts written down. That's awesome.
See, so where I found out everything was it's through Biosector. So if you search up like Biomedia Project, that's basically what I was gonna get to. Where like if you like are interested and you're like, oh, they don't sell the comics, I can't find the movies anywhere. Actually, all the movies are on YouTube, by the way. That is one thing. They're pretty much all there. They're all upscaled to like 4K or whatever now. It's great. But if you go to if you just search Biomedia Project online, you'll be able to find every single comic. Pretty much every book, as far as I'm concerned. Most of like the web games are all backed up on there, so it's a really cool archive of anything Bionicle. It doesn't go into Hero Factory on the website, but there is also some Gen 2 stuff on there as well. So if you're a bit of a zoomer, and you kind of missed the boat on Gen 1 and you want to check out Gen 2, they have a lot of that stuff on there too. So anyway, so the Toa Nuva embark on a journey to Voya Nui because that is where they believe that the Mask of Life is stationed. Okay, and then this is where we kind of get into personally like where I really started getting into Bionicle, mostly because we had the Paraka rap. Okay, you guys know what I'm talking about. All right. So we got the Paraka rap. We had the trailer with All American Rejects. There's Move Along was like one of the big songs here. This is where the music also gets really good. No, Green Day had one I think in like Metru Nui maybe. I don't recall exactly, but other than that, so it's basically All American Rejects. Daughtry does a song, and then Cryo Shell does a bunch. So basically, Voya Nui, it's a desolate wasteland. Okay, it is just like this hellish island that like no one should really live on. And again, I'm skipping over, for any of our other lore enthusiasts, I'm skipping over a lot of like the Karzani stuff that impacts the Matoran on here just for, because we are on a bit of a time constraint. So the Paraka, who were former Dark Hunters as well, they actually used to be another species that were basically warped into becoming bad guys. So like they were docile and pretty cool with everybody else, but then they basically just became a bunch of like gangsters and criminals, more or less. So so the Paraka, they look for the Mask of Life. The Paraka then enslave the Matoran on the island. They do this by lying to them and telling them that they're Toa. Okay, and like I don't know if you've looked at them, but they do not look happy. Like they're not heroic. Like yeah. So, but so anybody that kind of like second guess them, they're like, hey, I don't think that's right. If you see the orbs that the Paraka have in their little blasters there. Also, it's a little blaster toy hooked up to every single one of these sets. Super cool. I shot my brother in the eye with one. It was awesome. As you should. I can't read. It's yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, he was kind of asking for it. It's fine. But he's fine. His eye is fine. Okay, my entire family wears glasses. It's fine. But so if you see any of the orbs there, they actually get shot out, and they make the person that they get hit with, at least on the Matoran side of things, docile and more likely to be like mind controlled and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's how they basically took over an entire island. They turned the Matoran into essentially a workforce while trying to find the Mask of Life. However, 6 Matoran. And there's a lot of, obviously with like Bionicle, there's a lot of like themes of like legacy and stuff. I do find it interesting how, generally speaking, a lot of the Matoran also have similar masks, if not identical masks, to some of the Turaga as well. So if you look at the 6 Matoran there in the center, they all have the same masks as the original Toa Metru, right? But again, the Matoran here look a little bit weirder. They got warped by this guy called Karzani, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah, and as this happens, this is when everything kind of starts to intersect. The Toa Nuva, they go on the island, they look for the Mask of Life. The Toa Nuva show up, they get rocked. The Paraka just decimate them. So they take their masks and weapons, and they're all chained up, and it's not looking good for the Toa Nuva. And while this happens, the Matoran are still continuing to plan a revolt. And meanwhile, Balta, who is the red Matoran there, kind of the de facto leader of the group, he meets a legendary warrior that is in the bottom there called Axon. I do have some interactive stuff for you guys. There it is. Okay. All right. Feel free if you have not held a Bionicle before, please enjoy. Yeah, feel free. You can make it play around the room. That's totally fine. It's pretty rad. So and actually, at least on the more meta side of things, if you're talking about like which sets to buy, a lot of the bigger guys, so like Rudaka, Kitangu, Axon here, he's an agent of the member of Mata Nui, but that's neither here nor there yet. They're called Titan models, right? So all the things that are bigger than the average, like Toa size, so like the Paraka, Toa size, the Toa are obviously Toa size, and then all the big dudes are called Titans, generally speaking. But yeah, so while this happens, Axon unveils himself to the Matoran as an agent of Mata Nui, and he will do what it takes to keep the Great Spirit alive, because we also learned that the Great Spirit is fading fast, right? So we're kind of on a bit of a time crunch for the rest of the story. All right, so the Toa Nuva are MIA, and the Matoran and Takanuva go look. So the original 6 Matoran from Mata Nui that were mostly partnered up with, with the Toa. Sorry, I got all the names here, of course. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So we got, so Jaller, Holly, Nuparo, Huki, Congo, and Matoro. Matoro's very important. We're gonna get to him later. Okay? Yeah, so those 6 Matoran plus Takanuva, because they're all friends, they go and try to look for the Toa Nuva on Voya Nui. The Turaga actually don't want them doing this, so they kind of sneak out the back door, so to speak. And while this happens, they hit a barrier that only the Matoran can go through. Sorry. Excuse the typo there, please. So basically, Takanuva, long story short, again, I'm doing this for brevity's sake, Takanuva can't make it through, so he turns around and he goes right back to Metru Nui. And he's like, okay, yeah, this is your adventure, go have fun. And then when that happens, they're actually going through this like huge tunnel at one point. Matoro feels like a strange presence, and it feels as this is in a completely pitch black tunnel. Matoro feels like a strange presence that's kind of like tugging on his hand, trying to basically like get his attention. And while other people would, freak out, what if it's a spider, something like that. Matoro actually basically takes this creature's hand, like this presence, and leads it out of the tunnel. Eventually, again, one side quest later, they go to this dude's place named Karzani. They find Toa containers. So like much like the original containers that the Toa Mata showed up on Mata Nui with, they find some containers and they are hit with red lightning. So there's like a red star in the sky and all that. They get hit with red lightning, and then they become energized and they turn into what is called the Toa Inika. So these guys on the top here, these guys are sick. They had light up swords. It was awesome. So that transforms the 6 Matoran that we knew into the Toa Inika, and they arrive on Voya Nui and find the rebellious Matoran. There's a lot of smaller, inconclusive battles with the Paraka in between when they arrive and to kind of like the climax of the story. But they make their way to the volcano where the Mask of Life is housed. One side note that I would just like to mention here. If you look in the bottom right, this is a panel from the comic books here. There was a staff, basically, that the Paraka were screwing around with, and they hit the blue one there. I always forget, it's Vezok and Vezon. I think, Vezon is the one with the Mask of Life. Okay, so Vezok, they hit the blue one with, and it's supposed to be like a staff of fusion, but instead it just splits him into 2 people. So it turns, like, him into, like, a rage-filled monster, and then the other one is just crazy. So, like, the little, like, silver-looking one just kind of goes nuts, finds his way to the volcano first. While all of this happens, though, that 7th one, Vezon there, he makes his way to the volcano, and he actually becomes fused to the Mask of Life when he tries to take it. And so that's why, if you look at the set, you actually have the Mask of Life basically, like, not tattooed, but it's, like, molded onto the back of his head, basically. And so this makes him a very powerful guardian of the Mask, because the Mask of Life is somewhat kind of cognizant of its own actions, so it has some control over how it influences the world around it. Then, the Paraka and Brutaka versus the Toa Inika and Axon race for the mask. Brutaka is another very important person in this story as well. He's kind of, in the spiritual sense, he's Axon's brother. He's like blue and gold versus Axon's like red and silver. But they're on kind of opposing sides, where Brutaka's just kind of like, Mata Nui's never done shit for us, It's like I'm not going to try to protect him. Well, Axon basically tries to convince him that. So Brutaka works with the Paraka. Generally speaking, it's very like an uneasy alliance, and then Toa Inika and Axon race for the mask. The 7th Paraka, Vezon, is fused to the mask, like I already mentioned, and along the way, he actually has this really cool like spider guard thing that he rides, and again, another really sick set. It was awesome. And then, as this fight continues happening, the Toa Inika are able to actively get the mask, which is super cool. Basically, they're able to freeze Vezon and the creature that he is riding on, and Matoro just basically takes the mask right off. And then there's some pretty cool stuff that happens in here too. One of my favorite quotes is, "You fool, Axon, don't you realize you're fighting for a lost cause?" Axon says, "Don't you realize those are the only kind worth fighting for?" It goes kind of hard. It's great. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. If you want to read the comics, like, it is chef's kiss. It's great. Okay, and before we end our saga on Voya Nui, before they can celebrate, the mask flies into the nearby ocean. Right. And this is because, and we'll find this out very shortly, the Mask of Life basically sensed that the Matoran of an underwater area called Mahri Nui were like in grave danger. So it just, mask flies down there, and it's like, hey, yeah, Toa, you're coming with me. The Toa Inika find a tunnel that leads down below, and before they do that, they were given armor by Axon, and I believe there might have been a couple other Order of Mata Nui members on there. Basically, given the duty to protect Mata Nui, and they get this really cool like underwater, basically diving gear. It's pretty sick. All right, so the Toa Inika go down this tunnel underwater and arrive in Mata Nui, in Mahri Nui. Apologies. A lot of the other mask powers aren't really too important right now, but the one that I'm going to put in very bold right here, Matoro's mask power is reincarnation. Okay, so. Their armor eventually transforms because they're near this thing called the pit. Anybody in the pit basically gets mutated. It was more or less like a jail cell like millions of years ago, right? So any of like the hardened, like a lot of like those like dark hunters that we mentioned and the Baraki, which we're about to meet, were once thrown in the pit. They get mutated, they get turned freaky. So their arm, for at least the Toa Mari, well, you know, technically Toa Inika still, but kind of Toa Mari. Their armor transforms, turning them into water breathers, so they no longer can go on land, at least for the sake of this story. They begin searching for the Mask of Life while fighting off the Baraki. The Baraki were actually warlords underwater, but now, millions of years later, they are just kind of pedantic people, and they just argue over like land disputes, basically underwater. But basically, they see that the Mask of Life has come to Mahri Nui, and they want to take it. This, like I already said, takes place near the pit, which is basically a jail and mutates all around. Dekar, a yellow Matoran, just, you don't have too many yellow sets in Bionicle, so I think it's worth noting. Basically, he touches the Mask of Life because he's one of the first people to interact with it once it hits Mahri Nui. And Hydraxon, who you guys can see in the bottom right there, his consciousness fills him and transforms him into Hydraxon in pretty much every way. Occasionally, Dekar will kind of come through, but generally speaking, Hydraxon is a member of the Order of Mata Nui. He's one of the many defenders of Mata Nui, and it's just one of those things where it's kind of doesn't make you feel too good when you thought an innocent Matoran just kind of got gone, but All right, race for the mask again. You're racing for the mask a whole bunch of this series. Okay, so basically, the guard of the pit is an autonomous robot, so that's their Maxilos robot. So if you look at this like gray and red thing up there with kind of like the dog, like the water dog creature, that's a Maxilos robot. It's very cool. Basically, both of these teams split up in order to search for the mask because no one really knows where it went. So the Baraki and the Toa Mari are basically completely separated from each other. There's some pairings, but for the most part, they split up. But most notably, Matoro is on his own. So, while the Mahri and Baraki split up, Matoro hears a voice when he is near the pit. Makuta took over one of the Maxilos robots and released Matoro from basically the sticky situation he was stuck in. So, one thing that, at least my first time reading and like kind of going through the story when I was a kid, Makuta is actually, at least this one specific Makuta, which we'll get into later, he is able to turn himself into like this like gaseous form, more or less. So when his original body, I believe it was when his original body decomposed, he's basically just this like evil incarnate gas cloud that can like possess things. Most notably, the Maxilos robot right here. So, so while this happens, Matoro hears a voice, he realizes the robot is Makuta, and Mata Nui is near death, so this is causing like a ton of tremors in Mahri Nui. So things are shaking, things aren't looking good, like imminent danger for everybody around. As the chase for the mask continues, earthquakes start to shake the entire world. While this happens, Voya Nui crashes down. So basically, there's like that big tunnel. So Voya Nui is here, and then Mahri Nui is here, right down. Thankfully, though, the Order of Mata Nui were able to get civilians to safety. So just to illustrate here a little bit, so Voya Nui, you see that there's kind of this like big tunnel. That's more or less holding Voya Nui up. Okay, as far as physics are concerned, I'm not going to do the math on it. But so basically, once that tunnel breaks from the earthquakes and everything, crashes right down. Thankfully, though, the Order of Mata Nui on Voya Nui were able to get civilians to safety. Mahri Nui, however, is crushed by the sinking island. Once again, still racing for the mask. Everyone is chasing for the mask in the chaos. The final fight between Baraki and Toa Mari start to happen. Matoro breaks away, chasing after the Mask of Life as the world continues to break. One very notable thing here. The Great Spirit dies, right? So the Mask of Life dims, and just everyone in the Bionicle world can just kind of like feel it, They're just kind of like, the Great Spirit's dead, like our world is going to end. And then during the fighting, the Baraki destroy Makuta in the Mask Solos robot, but his spirit just basically dissipates and goes somewhere else. And we won't know where for a while. And then, just to let you know, while this final fight is happening, Jaller, who again is pretty much the de facto leader of the Toa Mahri here, he starts to go supernova underwaters. And Matoro would basically be the only person that was out of range as this was happening. So essentially, this is him like overcharging himself. He's a Toa of Fire. And more or less, it would kill him and everybody else in the area. So he's like, we're at a stalemate with the Baraki, the Great Spirit's dead. I'm gonna end it all, okay? Guys, you're coming down with me. So as he's about to blow up, the Mask of Life is dim, fall towards a crack in the seafloor. All is about to be lost. Jaller is about to go supernova. And then, as this happens, Matoro kind of realizes, he's like, oh, I'm in this huge cavern, I'm flying down, what's going on? And then he hears a mysterious voice that says, put on the mask. What? Who said that? I'm just going to kind of walk you through what happens here. The comic is fantastic. I would recommend you read it on your own as well. Long story short, the mask begins to talk to Matoro, just saying, put me on, right? So if you remember correctly, Matoro's power, reincarnation. So what happens here after he puts on the mask? Again, that art is so sick. But I am no longer just a Toa. I am the Mask of Life, and it is me. And while I still live, I will use its power. My friends will not die. All right, so this is as Matoro kind of becomes just, like, he feels like this, like, godlike power rush into him as he's wearing the Mask of Life. So what Matoro does do, in his last moments, he feels no fear, all right? Matoro, he's a hero, all right? And he dies sacrificing himself for everybody else. So in his final moments, he does a few things. He basically tells the Baraki kick rocks, right? He does nothing with the Baraki, but he does transport the other 5 Toa Mahri back up to Voya Nui, and they could breathe air again. So like just during that, he was able to like reassemble particles and stuff, and all of that happens. So Matoro, reincarnating Mata Nui, the Great Spirit himself, he dies in the process. That being said, everyone immediately feels this, right? So all the Matoro is saying he lives, Mata Nui lives, you know, the Great Spirit lives, that's great. And basically, as the Toa Mahri kind of rejoin everybody else, you know, they basically, you know, kind of have a tribute to Matoro as they head back to Metru Nui. Let's see, time check. Okay, so 6:13. Okay, we got to blast through these. Okay, more cool sets. All right, so we got the Fantaka and the return of the Toa Nuva, right? So if you were not keeping up with the entire story for a long time, at least me personally, I was like, hey, where did those characters go? Like, that's kind of weird. Like, we haven't actually heard from them in a long time, because it was from like 2003 to 2000. I want to say 8. There was no word or at least like no new sets of the Toa Nuva, right? So they come back, they're kitted out in all this like really cool flying gear, and they're in this place called Karda Nui. This is basically the core of Mata Nui, right? So everyone's like, it's a very spiritual place, and there's this thing called the Codex that they need to go and find. So, again, we're skipping over a lot. The Toa Nuva are granted adapting armor that fit with any situation that they're in, basically by the god of creation. I'll touch on that a little bit later, I promise. Toa Nuva then goes search the Mask of Life as it falls, after it fell down from that crack in the seafloor. So just to let you know what happens. So as Matoro was sacrificing himself to the mask, he actually finds himself to be in a waterfall. And then that waterfall is in this gigantic underground chasm, basically, where is a whole other sect of people living down there, right? So it's more Matoran. There's no extra Toa, but there is just a lot of, like, it's a huge ecosystem down there. So Toa Nuva goes search for the Mask of Life, and they try to find the Codex, which is basically the core of Mata Nui, which is the key to awakening the Great Spirit officially. So like right now, the Great Spirit is kind of like stabilized, but it's not like awake. They fight a bunch of Makuta and air battles, and eventually find all of the keystones, which are basically MacGuffins, to open the Codex alongside the Mask of Life. The inhabitants of Karda Nui are Matoran, so this is one thing to keep in mind. Matoran of Light. So like how I said that there's kind of like 6 elements, kind of 7 that you need to know about. The Matoran of Light, it's kind of like a Pokemon or like rock, paper, scissors, all right? Light beats dark, generally speaking, right? But we have other Makuta, right? So, and this is also the time where a lot of stupid kids that can't read found out there's not just the one Makuta. The big Makuta that has been kind of the main villain is Makuta Pterodax, but there's a whole brotherhood of Makuta here. So you see these other, basically all the bad looking guys here. they were able to essentially brainwash a bunch of the Matoran, turn them into Shadow Matoran, and then the Toa team up with the other Av Matoran, and light versus dark, that kind of stuff. And then after that, we have the Mystica line, which is basically the other half of the Toa Nuva that are in like the swamp area of Karda Nui. So inspired by Matoro's sacrifice, the Mask of Life grants itself a body while it's sitting in the bottom of the swamp, becoming the Toa Inika, right? So you can see the mask on the model right there. Basically, it using its own like consciousness, it is like, hey, that Matoro guy did something really cool for me, and then it turns itself into its own Toa, and it now has its own like glider too, which is pretty rad. So as this happens, the various Makuta try to stop the Toa from waking the Great Spirit. The Toa slowly find all of the keys and enter the Codex. They find some flyers they could use to fight. And again, we're really just hitting like notes here. And then, as you can see in the bottom right-hand screen, if you look at the red flying thing, that's actually Liwa. Now that he has some like new armor, and it's a really cool set. And so they one thing to note when they get inside of the Codex itself, they find 6 basically canisters inside the Codex that were like made for them. So they're like, what the hell's going on? That's weird. And then, again, I really wish I had time to talk about this. Takanuva, there's like some like multiverse stuff that happens. So that's actually the Takanuva set, like the big gray and white one. He was once the Toa of Light. He goes through some really bad stuff, and then he becomes a Toa of both light and dark, right? So it's very, hence why he's gray, All right, the core. The Toa Inika find the core. Sorry, it's not proper grammar in the slide. In order to fully wake Mata Nui, he needs to sacrifice himself, basically to kind of like supercharge the core. Inspired by Matoro, he flies into the core. While this happens, the Toa Nuva and Matoran run. A giant explosion kills the remaining Makuta in Karda Nui. Okay, I'm going to show you guys one of the commercials here. This should take about 2.5 minutes, because I could not really put into words this gigantic plot twist that's about to happen. But as this giant explosion happens, the entire world starts to shake, right? So those earthquakes that we were talking about when the Great Spirit was about to die, like tenfold. Everything is shaking. Mata Nui, the island, is breaking apart. And everyone's like, what the hell's going on? So I'm just going to play this for you. I'll get to it.
Entering the treacherous swamp of Karda Nui, the Toa must be prepared for anything. Makuta has mutated into terrifying giant insects, forever on the hunt. The Toa will have to use all their skills and knowledge to stay alive. Alone, a Toa soon becomes the prey. Even heroes need backup. Only unity will make them strong in their search for the elusive keystones. At the heart of the Bionicle universe, the Toa finally assemble the key that opens the legendary Codex, the core of the mystery and source of all power. Deep inside the Codex, the heroes are equipped for the final confrontation. With new craft of daring design and amazing power. Makuta steals one, and suddenly, the chase is on. Evil must be stopped if the Toa are to succeed in their ultimate quest. Reboot the Bionicle universe or submit to the power of Makuta. Dive into the darkness. Ignite the flame within. Now there is no turning back. Make the future begin.
Okay, so to summarize, in case you couldn't tell what just happened there, they were in a giant robot the whole time! Yeah, so that plot twist blew my 10-year-old brain. It's nuts. So allow me, here we go. Okay, so you might be wondering, how the hell were we in a giant robot the whole time? Thankfully, some really cool fans that are more talented than I am basically drew a map, all right? So there's some shocking revelations here. No one really knew that Mata Nui was what is now called the Great Spirit Robot, right? So if you look on the island section here, that's Mata Nui, and it broke apart as kind of like the face of the giant robot started waking up. You go underground, you see Metru Nui here, right? Voya Nui right here, kind of like in the middle of nowhere in the ocean. Mahri Nui right below it. Karda Nui right here, and then the Coderex leads to what is E on this infographic right here. Yeah. Which, and again, it's really cool. You know, Mask Life sacrifices himself. It's basically like a continent-sized robot that just stands up in the middle of the ocean. I'm gonna go over some of the lore. We only got a handful of minutes here left. But to let you know, when you saw the Mask of Life kind of shooting out after that happened, what happened was Makuta, when he got destroyed by the Baraki, he actually sent his like mist gaseous form, whatever, to essentially what is like the CPU of the Great Spirit Robot, and he took it over. Right, so as soon as everyone starts celebrating, you know, we finally woke the Great Spirit. It's been 8 years of this. It was only 1 year or more, but it's been 8 years since, you know, my 10-year-old brain can handle that. And then Makuta immediately takes it over, and he's like, yeah, you guys are mine now. We're in a giant robot. Deal with it. So, to give you some ancient past backstory, this is a lot, and again, I'm paraphrasing so much, okay? The Great Spirit Robot, the GSR, was created by the Great Beings and was maintained by the Matoran. The Matoran were actually mindless workers. They were essentially like AI, so they really had no personality, nothing. The Great Beings just needed things to run the Great Spirit Robot as it basically tried to catalog life. Now, Makuta Pterodax, who's the main Makuta, was a high-ranking Bionicle in the Brotherhood of Makuta. He wasn't the leader yet. He actually betrayed the original leader, but again, we don't have time to go through it. The Makuta were not always bad, actually. They were just in charge of keeping things in order, right? So they would kind of, like, there wasn't anything, like they weren't evil yet. But they were establishing peace across the universe with the help of the Order of Mata Nui and the Brotherhood of Makuta. So the Order of Mata Nui also helps kind of, like, protected the Great Spirit Robot, but the Brotherhood of Makuta did kind of, like, the dirty work, right? And then they were all, basically, the main purpose was to catalog planets and life forms here. Oh, thank you so much. Did anybody else get a chance to not touch Axon? Everybody good? Okay. Okay. So we're going to leave him right there. There we go. So they were establishing peace across the universe, cataloging planets and life forms, and the Toa Mata / Nuva were once guardians of Mata Nui, but they were comatose for 1,000 years. And that great cataclysm that I told you about during Metru Nui when Makuta was trying to take over Metru Nui, long story short, the Great Spirit Robot, because Makuta was trying to take over then, basically crashed into this water planet. And that is where, basically how this Great Spirit Robot got to where it is. And it rested for thousands of years when that happened. So, and you might be wondering, oh, how did land masses form around this? At least for the island of Mata Nui, it's almost like a cloaking mechanism that the Great Spirit Robot had. In the Bull Rock, not actually evil things, even though they were tainted by Makuta, they were actually in charge of basically cleaning off the island when it was time for the Great Spirit to wake again. So they would like just kind of like rock diggers, kind of. Yes, sir.
Did they make an actual Great Spirit robot now?
No, and I'm pissed about it. People have submitted it for I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's like Lego Ideas, right? Yeah. So people have submitted a ton, and they all look really cool.
And there's been plenty of mock-ups.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, plenty of people have done. Yes. What's up? Correct. Yes. So it's kind of, yeah. All right. So, going into this, the Mask of Life ejects itself after Makuta took over because we only have 5 minutes, so I'm really going to have to blast through this. It lands on a neighboring planet, Barra, Magna. Thousands of Matoran are enslaved in this process, right? Makuta basically keeps them in line with the Rakshi and a couple other, like I think the Vizirac were in there as well. An uprising is planned with all the Toa, And this is the really cool thing, and again, there's no official sets, so these are like fan mocks. Rudaka, who actually initially poisoned the Rahagi from all the way back in Metru Nui, she turns them back into Toa, which is really cool. So now we have like 3 main Toa teams. We have the Toa Nuva, then we have the Toa Mahri, and then we have the Toa Haga right here. And then the Toa and the remaining Baraki actually team up to try and overthrow Pterodax. So they're like, hey, I don't want to be enslaved for the rest of my life. Let's fix this, okay? And then, so while this is happening, this is the Glatorian Saga. This was this is getting to the end of the story here. So as the Mask of Life lands on Barra Magna, it once again creates itself a new body. And now it's basically Mata Nui. All right, so the spirit of Mata Nui ejects itself, lands on Barra Magna, creates his own Toa body. The only things that really change are the terminology. Agori are Barra Magna Matoran, right? So it's like a different culture. And then Glatorian are Barra Magna Toa, essentially. Basically, when Mata Nui arrives on Barra Magna, he finds tribes that solve disputes with gladiator combat. This all kind of starts when he stops someone from getting killed from behind. If you've seen the Legend Reborn movie, again, it's probably the worst out of the 4. Like, like it's okay. But what happens is that he rallies the troops against the Scroll. I believe it's Scroll. I'm sorry, I might have did a typo there. Scroll. Thank you. And then basically they're the most powerful and oppressing group of the bunch. So if you see kind of like the black armored ones, they are basically just kind of like a clan that just kind of like controls and beats on people. Let's see here. All right. Next big thing, and we are about out of time here. So, Mata Nui discovers the prototype Great Spirit robot. So initially, the Great Beings actually wanted to make the Great Spirit robot. But here's the thing: the initial energy source on their home planet exploded. Right. So we're talking a continent-sized robot here. It explodes and it actually splits the initial planet into 3. So that's a pretty good map of the universe right there. So there's basically, so the main planet that we were on, and then there's Barra Magna, which is a complete desert planet, and there's like a jungle planet that we don't really talk about until later. Yeah. So they went to war with each other, the Great Beings, and then the result was Spherus Magna, now Barra Magna, splitting into 3 planets. The explosion was caused when they couldn't manage the power source of the prototype robot, and when Mata Nui does, he convinces tribes to help him put the giant robot back together to fight Makuta one more time. Because Makuta knows what Mata Nui is up to, he's going to try to travel to Barra Magna with the Great Spirit robot to stop it. So stars in the final battle, okay? The last line of Bionicle was kind of disappointing. Feel free to disagree with me if you want. Like, they're kind of cute. Like, yeah, it was way too. Yeah, like if we got like an actual like another like 12 sets, like 6 Toa and like 6. So cool. Would have been so cool. What's up? Yeah, that'd be so cool, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, the last line was basically Matoran, and they were like, "Guys, see, this is Tahu. He's shorter than the one you had 10 years ago, but yeah." All right. So closing up here, the great. So basically, Makuta lands on Barra Magna. The 2 Great Spirit robots start fighting, and they're just slugging it. Makuta is actually steadily winning because again, it's a prototype. It wasn't really, it wasn't as strong as the one that actually made it off the planet. Mata Nui uses the Mask of Life's power to create powerful gold armor that can empower someone once they wear it all. So basically, you had these sets where with stars, if you bought all of them, you would get a full set of the gold armor. You could attach it to Tahu, and then he'd be the guy that saves the day. So Tahu and Takanuva track down the gold pieces and lead the united armies against Makuta. This gives Mata Nui enough time to pull a moon into the head of Makuta, which is badass. And long story short, that KOs Makuta. And then we get to the epilogue of the story. With the world being thrown out of balance, Mata Nui sacrifices himself. Using the power of the Mask of Life and his own powers, he resets the universe. The 3 planets are now joined once again, and all of the characters can live in harmony. That is the story of the Bionicle. Thank you. 6:30 on the dot. I did it. Yeah! All right. And thank you. Once again, if you guys are interested in my YouTube channel, check it out. Sorry, I got to do another plug. But thank you all. And everybody, have a great time. Hopefully I'll see you guys at the death battle in a little bit. Guys, have a great con. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it.